Okay. We'll build the wall, but who's gonna pay for the wall?
Along the vast expanse of the U.S. Mexico border, something extraordinary is taking shape. Advanced military aircraft patrol the skies. Thousands of armed troops stand ready on American soil, and an unprecedented construction project stretches as far as the eye can see. The year is 2025, and the border between these two nations is transforming in ways never before imagined. Cold steel and concrete rise from the desert floor, creating not just a physical barrier, but a new reality that's reshaping international relations, local communities, and the lives of millions. What started as a controversial campaign promise has evolved into the largest militarized infrastructure project in modern American history. The scale is staggering. Billions of dollars, thousands of workers, and cutting-edge technology all converging on one of the world's longest international boundaries. And yet, the massive wall itself is merely the beginning of a transformation that's about to change everything. Let me take you inside what's really happening at the border right now, because the story that's unfolding is wilder than anything you could imagine. The 2024 campaign was relentless. Trump's promise to complete the border wall became more than just a political pledge. It turned into a battle cry. Every rally, every speech circled back to one central theme, finishing what he started in his first term. So, the moment he stepped back into the Oval Office in January 2025, Trump didn't waste a second. Day 1, he declares a national emergency at the southern border. Day 2, construction crews are already mobilizing. By the end of his first week, the entire landscape of border security was transforming. Right now, as we speak, an army of workers, sometimes 2,000 to 4,000 at a time, are spreading across the border like ants on a massive construction site. We're talking about teams working brutal 12-hour shifts in conditions that would make most people quit on day 1. The desert heat is merciless, often shooting past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The terrain? Imagine trying to build a skyscraper on the side of a mountain. These crews are laying massive concrete foundations and raising steel barriers on slopes so steep that even getting the equipment in place is a challenge. The scale of this operation goes way beyond anything ever attempted on American soil. While construction crews pour concrete and weld steel, elite military units from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions patrol the perimeter. These combat troops, 1,500 strong and counting, carry loaded weapons as they monitor the border, marking an unprecedented shift in how America handles domestic security operations. And that's not all. The wall itself is a marvel of military engineering. Army Corps of Engineers teams are overseeing the installation of massive steel bollards. Think giant hollow beams filled with concrete that tower up to 30 feet high. Underground, deep foundations snake through the earth to prevent tunneling. Every inch of this barrier is watched by a network of thermal cameras and motion sensors that feed into high-tech command centers operating 24/7. But the most dramatic change isn't happening on the ground, it's in the skies. Navy P-8 aircraft, normally tasked with hunting Russian submarines, now circle above the border on daily missions. Even more striking is the appearance of the legendary U-2 spy plane, an aircraft that once peered into Soviet military bases during the Cold War's tensest moments. These planes are gathering intelligence deep into Mexican territory, tracking cartel movements with technology so advanced it can spot a single person from the edge of space. The results? Border Patrol Chief Michael Banks' latest numbers tell a striking story. Daily arrests have nosedived from over 1,500 in December to just 654 in early 2025. Behind these statistics lies a transformed border landscape where military might meets cutting-edge surveillance in ways that are reshaping not just the physical boundary, but the entire concept of border security. The thing is, the states are taking it really seriously. Like, really serious this time. And that leads the effects of this massive operation rippling far beyond the wall itself. Mexican border cities are transforming before our eyes. In Ciudad Juarez, what was once a bustling border economy has become ground zero for a growing crisis. Shopping malls are being gutted and converted into makeshift shelters. Empty lots are sprouting tent cities. President Sheinbaum's government is racing to build 10 massive reception centers, each designed to house thousands of people who suddenly find themselves stranded in limbo. Meanwhile, the U.S. military's taken on a role that would have been unthinkable just months ago. C-17 and C-130 cargo planes, typically used for combat operations and humanitarian relief, now serve as deportation flights. These massive aircraft thunder through Latin American skies, carrying hundreds of deportees to countries across the region. Ecuador and Guatemala have reluctantly accepted these flights, but the situation with Colombia erupted into a full-blown diplomatic firestorm. It started when Colombian President Petro stood his ground against these military deportation flights. 2 U.S. aircraft were already in the air, packed with deportees. When Petro refused them permission to land, what followed was 9 hours of intense international drama. Trump threatens Colombia with crushing tariffs, visa cancellations, and financial sanctions. For a country that's been America's closest Latin American ally for decades, receiving over $14 billion in U.S. aid since 2000, this was a shocking turn of events. The standoff ended with Colombia backing down, but the damage was done. The wall project is no longer just about border security. It's affecting long-standing diplomatic relationships and pushing Latin American countries to rethink their ties with the U.S. Some are already turning to China, looking to reduce their reliance on a U.S. immigration policy that's becoming more aggressive. To understand how we got here, we need to quickly look at the history of the border wall. The concept isn't new. The first reported fence was built in 1911, primarily to prevent cattle from crossing between Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Sonora. But the modern era of border barriers really began in the 1990s under President Bill Clinton, with Operations Hold the Line and Gatekeeper. The push for a comprehensive border wall came with the 2006 Secure Fence Act under President George W. Bush, which authorized about 700 miles of fencing. But it was Donald Trump who made the wall a central focus of American politics, first during his 2016 campaign, and then throughout his first term. Now, in 2025, we're seeing the culmination of these efforts, but on a scale that dwarfs all previous attempts. The current project isn't just about building a physical barrier. It's a complete militarization of the border region. And it doesn't come cheap. When you start digging into the financial side of this project, the numbers are enough to make your head spin. Take a mile of wall in flat, easy-to-build terrain. That's already $6 million right there. Now imagine trying to build that same wall through remote mountain passes or across treacherous desert ravines. And suddenly you're looking at $30 million for that same mile. The total spending's already blown past $15 billion, eating through congressional funds and redirected defense money like it's nothing. And now we're talking about something on an entirely different scale. Senator Lindsey Graham just dropped a bombshell in the Senate, a $175 billion border security package stretched over the next decade. To put that in perspective, it's more than double what the government currently spends on border security each year. The director of immigration studies at the Cato Institute called it more money than I've ever seen be considered. Where's all this money going? The wall is just part of it. The plan calls for a massive expansion of detention facilities. We're talking about jumping from 40,000 beds to 100,000. Border Patrol and ICE would see their ranks swell with new hires. Even state and local law enforcement would get a piece of the pie to help with immigration enforcement. Texas alone is asking for $11 billion just to cover what they've already spent on their state-led border operations. The scale of spending has even caught some Republican committee chairs off guard. They're freaking out, according to former Biden administration budget advisor Bobby Kogan, questioning whether they can actually find enough places to cut other government spending to offset these massive new expenditures. Meanwhile, the House Freedom Caucus is pushing for even more. They want $200 billion for border and military spending, plus another $486 billion in cuts to other programs over the next decade. But is all this money actually translating into real progress on the wall? Let's break down exactly what's happening on the ground right now. Out of the nearly 2,000-mile border, about 700 miles of barrier have been completed so far. That includes both brand new sections and major upgrades to older fencing. Construction is happening simultaneously in multiple locations. New sections are going up near the San Ysidro land port of entry in California, while teams are racing to close gaps in the existing barrier around San Diego. Over in Texas, crews are pushing forward with construction from El Paso all the way to Sunland Park. The wall itself is a feat of engineering that goes way beyond just putting up a fence. Every section starts with clearing and stabilizing the ground. Then comes the foundation, massive concrete structures that extend several feet underground to prevent tunneling. On top of that, crews install the steel bollards. These aren't just simple posts, they're hollow vertical beams filled with concrete, each one stretching between 18 and 30 feet into the sky. Anti-climbing plates crown the top, making it nearly impossible to scale. Construction is moving at different speeds depending on the terrain. In flat, accessible areas, crews can make decent progress, but in places like the rocky landscapes east of San Diego or the treacherous mountain ranges where few migrants even attempt to cross, construction slows to a crawl. Each mile in these challenging areas requires specialized equipment and techniques, which explains why the cost can shoot up from $6 million to $30 million per mile. The Fisher Sand and Gravel Company, which holds both the 2018 and 2020 federal contracts, is leading much of the construction. They're working alongside the Army Corps of Engineers, particularly around Friendship Park near San Diego, where new sections have been under construction for almost 2 weeks straight. Well, with 12-hour shifts, the work never really stops. Looking ahead to March 2025, several new projects are set to begin in both California and Texas. The CBP is especially focused on closing what they call numerous gaps in the existing barrier. But here's the catch. Even with all this activity, less than half of the total border has been covered. Natural barriers like rivers and mountains take care of some stretches, but vast areas remain without any fencing at all. In Texas, where Governor Abbott's pushing to build 100 miles of state-funded wall by the end of 2026, they're moving at about half a mile per week. That might sound slow, but considering each section requires not just construction but also the installation of thermal cameras, motion sensors, and a network of surveillance towers, it's a massive undertaking. And when you understand that the wall sections themselves are just part of a larger infrastructure system, it makes sense. Each segment includes underground sensor networks, power systems for the surveillance equipment, and access roads for maintenance and patrol vehicles. It's essentially creating a high-tech security corridor that stretches for hundreds of miles through some of North America's most challenging terrain. So when will this massive project actually be finished? That's the trillion-dollar question. And honestly, nobody seems to have a clear answer. The Trump administration's pushing hard to accelerate construction, but at the current pace, we're looking at several more years of work ahead. Because one thing's for sure, this project isn't going anywhere. It looks like the sound of construction equipment and the sight of cranes along the border will be part of the landscape for years to come. But for now, keep an eye on Visionary, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when it's all set. Until next time,